A debt collector is not a creditor, and they may not be able to report to your credit report. And in this video, I'm going to break down what is a debt collector and how to remove it from your credit report. Most people think that debt collectors own the debt, but they do not. They have to prove validation and verification if they're on your credit report. That is the difference between having authority versus ownership. I'm going to break it all down. So let's start with this. What is a debt collector? A debt collector is not original creditor. They bought this alleged debt from the alleged original creditor. And until the debt collector proves that the debt is valid, then they should not be placed on your credit report. There's something called bulk debt, which debt collectors like to buy. And it's something called as a third party collector, meaning they're collecting on the behalf of that creditor. And if they are a third party, that means that it has to be some type of transfer of assignment that was in place to allow them to collect on the behalf of that original creditor. A debt collector typically buys the debt in bulk, and when they buy it in bulk, they paying it for it. They are paying for it for pennies on a dollar. And when they do this, they don't really know that it's you. They're just getting your information, such as like your name, your address. They're getting generic information. So the moment that you say that that collection is yours, then that is where you messed up, because you already admitted to a debt, because you're thinking like, well, I really did have this Capital One credit card. I really did have this Credit One bank credit card, but make them prove it. Okay, write that down. Make them prove it. Next, we're going to look at ownership versus authority. This is where they fail because they cannot necessarily prove it. You think I'm lying? Watch me show you. Here's the biggest lie that debt collectors like to rely on: that having your name and the balance is ownership. No, it does not mean that. To legally collect or report to your credit report, a collector must prove who the original creditor is, that the debt was legally assigned or sold. They are the party with the rights to this alleged debt. The chain of title from start to finish. So they cannot provide a chain of title just from them to the original creditor, because all banks do something called securitization. And we're going to go over that in another video. So make sure that you liking this video and subscribing so that you can get notified when I do content like this. Most collectors cannot provide this from start to finish. So this is your loophole when you are trying to get them off your credit report. You're asking them those 4 things to make them validate and prove the verification of the debt. This is why you're asking for the bill of sale, the assignment, the full chain of title, the double-sided counting. All of those things are necessary to make sure that a debt collector can legally or lawfully report to your credit report. Verification versus validation. Let's be clear. Verification is not validation, and validation is not verification. There's 2 different things. A collector saying we verify the debt without providing any documentation is not verification. A debt collector saying that they validated a debt and did not give you any of those things that I just mentioned, then that is not validation. Validation and verification means contracts, assignments, proof of ownership, proof you agreed to the debt. And under the FDCPA, once you dispute, they must stop collecting on the debt. What does that mean, Destiny? That means that they're not supposed to be reporting on your credit report until you literally say, this debt is mine. Can somebody smell money? Because I smell a whole lot of money. So if they are still collecting on your credit report after you told them, I don't think this is mine, and they sent some generic statements and they didn't wait for you to say, okay, this debt is mine, they had to prove validation and ownership of this debt, and they never do. Ownership is verification. So this is how they break and violate the FDCPA. But let's talk about how they break the FCRA, because this is where you can sue them at, okay? You can sue them underneath the FDCPA, but we're going to talk about that in a later video. But let's talk about the FCRA, because that's the money. If a debt collector is furnishing information that is not correct and you initiate a dispute with the consumer reporting agencies to trigger 15 USC 1681 S2-B, and the debt collector does not properly verify the debt, meaning and prove that they have ownership, then this is where you can sue them at, because a debt collector must provide validation and verification, especially if they are on your credit report. This is the reason why you can sue underneath the FCRA, because underneath the FCRA, they must consider and review all relevant information. They must conduct an investigation, and they must provide you the outcome and all the documentation that they use, which is the method of verification, to state that this account is yours. And if they do not do this, then you can sue them. And debt collectors like to do this all the time. They like to validate the debt just using statements, but statements does not mean that they have a right to your debt. So just to recap, if you have a collection on your credit report, you want to go through all the channels. You want to make sure that you make them provide validation and verification. And if they do not, then you need to go sue them underneath the FCRA and the FDCPA. Why? Because that's your business and you have a right to do it. And when you do sue them, then you can get the collection removed, and you can also possibly get a settlement check. Just make sure you read those settlement agreements. But we're going to go into like judgments and all of those things in the next video. So I'm going to try to put out a video every week. I'm going to put out a video every week, because my goal this year is just to teach, to help the American people to understand their rights and to be able to litigate for themselves. Because why not, right? If the debt collector is parking a debt on your credit report unlawfully, then you have every right underneath the FCRA to sue them. And you can also sue the Consumer Reporting Agency and furnishers, but we're going to go over those in other videos. Please make sure you share this with a friend, because guess what? When I win, you win. That means we all win. See you next week.